I'm,
Hello and welcome to this episode of The Thing About Cars. I'm Mickey Desai. Around the table, we've got a fun group today. Tim, how are you?
Doing great, thank you.
And Ben,
I'm awesome. How about you?
you are awesome. Thank you. I'm also somewhat awesome. Although, yeah. Anyway, Misty.
Uh, Surprisingly not moist, although there is a storm coming in that's supposed to hit the UK this afternoon, and expecting it to make its way across the channel with all alacrity.
Yes, alacrity. And our esteemed guest, Dr. Bob McMahan, who's the president of Kettering University. Did I get that right, Bob?
you did indeed.
Absolutely. Bob I've been looking forward to this for a long time. We've never actually delved too deep into the world of academia before with the show. But my first question for you is, even before we do trivia, you said you grew up in the Carolinas?
Yeah. I'm originally, if you go back far enough, I'm from Florida. My mother is from Georgia, and my father is from North Carolina. And I spent most of my time in North Carolina, most of my life in North Carolina. So I kind of consider that my home.
That's very cool. Well,
Yeah.
I think you're definitely among friends in that case. But
Oh, yeah.
I have more questions here, but let's get our trivia question down first.
Okay, so our trivia question today is: what do tetraethyl lead, the famous octane booster in leaded gasoline, and difluoromethane, also known as R12 refrigerant, have in common? A, they eventually faced worldwide bans. B, their research and development was done at General Motors. C, Cornell mechanical engineering graduate Thomas Midgley Jr. was responsible for both of them. Or D, all of the above.
Wow.
Do you want me to run that again?
Yeah, let's do it one more time just for.
Okay.
Can I raise my hand now, or should I? No.
No cheating allowed. That's it. All right. So, what do tetraethyl lead, the octane booster in leaded gasoline, and difluoromethane, also known as R12 refrigerant, have in common? A, they eventually faced worldwide bans. B, the research and development was done at General Motors. C, Cornell mechanical engineering graduate Thomas Midgley Jr. was responsible for both of them. Or D, all of the above.
I think I know the answer already. I'm not sure, but Ben looks like he's pondering. In any case, how does a Southern gentleman such as yourself, Dr. McMahon, Bob, how do you end up in Michigan?
That's a great question. And I know we only have 20 minutes, so I can't go into this long. But I have a career that makes sense only in the rearview mirror. But what I'll abbreviate and say I've spent my life in industry, but I've also spent it in education the whole time. And I love the model here. I think this school is the way that we should be teaching a lot of things. And it goes back, interestingly, to the formation of the automotive industry and the philosophy that came out of it. And so when the opportunity came up, I jumped at it because it's a phenomenal program.
Yeah, I have heard nothing but good things about it. The friend of mine who said you should reach out to the university to see what's happening there. I think her son is a student currently. Lisa Greer is my friend,
Mhm.
and everybody that I've spoken about, everyone who I've spoken to briefly about the university is just sort of delighted at the notion that it's a not conventional sit in the classroom for a semester at a time kind of experience. But can you explain to our listeners exactly how the model works, how it comes together?
Yeah, it's actually if I can just divert into about 5 minutes of history because I think it's important in this way.
Yes.
In Flint, the university's in Flint, Michigan, and Flint in the early 1900s was like the Silicon Valley of the U.S. I mean, people were flooding into this city at the rate of like 10, 20, 30,000 a year, and it was at the same time General Motors as a company was actually forming. And it was forming out of a bunch of startups, basically, carriage businesses, whip buggy businesses, a whole bunch of stuff here. In fact, in like 1917, they had like 150 startups in Flint, in this business. This is going crazy. But the founders of the business understood that all these people coming in would have to be educated if they were going to be able to participate in this, and they were going to be able to be useful in the company. And so they decided to start a school to bring everybody up and to educate engineers and the technicians and all the people that they would need in the factories. But but they had a very different model in mind. They thought that the difference that they didn't just want to create a school because these people had to be useful. They needed to actually learn the stuff, not just the theory of the stuff, but they needed to learn how to do it. And so they came up with a model that was based a lot on the apprenticeship models that were in the copper areas of Michigan at the time, and in some of the early apprenticeship models that were being developed. And they brought Charles Kettering in, who started Delco down in Dayton, Ohio. And they brought him in as the vice president for engineering for this new company called General Motors. And he had this philosophy of he had been involved with the University of Cincinnati and Antioch, and they all had cooperative programs. And he said, "Now this is the way that you do." And so he wouldn't have said it this way, but he had a very famous. Well, I'll start with it. He had a very famous quote. He said one time, he said, if we educated musicians the way that we educate engineers, we would teach them 12 years of music theory before we ever let them touch a piano."
Mm-hmm.
And that's stupid on its face, but that is actually how we educate engineers, right?
I think that's brilliant. I think that's a brilliant quote. Yeah.
We send them through 12, 14, 16, 18 years of school. And then we say, here, now go out and be useful. And they said, that's not how you do it. And the difference between just learning something and mastering it is practice. And so they built an educational model where the students when they come to school, they enter in a rotation. They are here 12 weeks in classroom, one of the best engineering schools in the country. They're here in intense classrooms, labs, and yes, we have fraternities. We have all the things that a normal university does, but they are here to study. They're hardworking. And then 12 weeks, they rotate out, and 12 weeks, they're in a professional role in an industry, in something that's relevant to what they're learning. This is not an internship, which is like a one and done. This is not a summer co-op program where they just go for a couple summers and learn. This is 50-50. They spend half of their time outside of the university in engineering teams, in product development teams, in doing in the labs and anything, doing the work, working in a corporate environment, being mentored in that environment, understanding how to move ideas through a company. How do you work? How do you work in teams? All those things we say are so important. They learn. Then they come back. They start, and then they learn the theory of it. And then as they're advancing in the theory, they are advancing in the career. And so by the time our students graduate, they've got a degree from one of the best undergraduate engineering schools in the country, but they've also got 2.5 years of real professional experience, and they got a resume.
Yes.
A lot of our students, when they graduate, they're supervising other people by the time they graduate. A lot of them graduate with patents and intellectual property. And the companies love them, and the organizations. And it's not just automotive, although we have our roots in automotive. We have students at Los Alamos National Labs. We have students at Biomet Zimmer Biotechnology. We have students in finance and out at Apple and Google Web Services. We have students in all these different technologies, but we especially love our roots in automotive.
Well, I found that really interesting because having a son in school who is doing a degree, I know in the Netherlands, they start with a weekly internship from like the very first year, and like last year was his first year, and he was rotating kind of between all of these different types of high schools, which I found to be, really useful. And then also having been a manager with interns, oh my. The number of interns, and now admittedly most of mine were business degrees, but that just like the one that always sticks in my mind is the one that didn't realize that pretty is not going to get you everywhere for very long.
We have those everywhere, Misty.
I know.
I run into that all the time.
Yeah, but I mean, but just the number of times I would have to say, okay, now this is this is an adult job, and I think that lack of practical experience is what harms so many university students, and
Yeah.
also even your more technical or vocational schools as well.
Well, many universities have to try to broach or give birth to a co-op program of some sort, but it's still not the same thing as what Kettering does.
No.
No, it's really we're actually really truly unique. There's no other university that operates in this way. And to your point, Missy, it's not just about going out and having a job and working in industry. It's about coordinating what you're working that job with what you're studying, and that they're relevant to each other, right? And so, and it breeds a whole different form of education too, because the students come back and the professors will sit at the front of the classroom in a lecture, and they'll say, here's the theory, da, 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 and how do you use this in your role? Jane, I know you're working in the cryogenic wind tunnel in this facility, and how do you use it in this form? And Jane will say, no, we use this approximation because that part we don't need to worry about, and this part we do, and this is how we streamline what we're doing, et cetera. And so they'll build that into the class and say, okay, so this is irrelevant. And you can't, that is just so, that's so powerful, because
to see curriculum and getting adapted in real time, that is really
in real
cool.
time.
Yeah.
And I always say we're unusual in a school because we get evaluated. The relevance of what we're doing in the classroom gets reevaluated every 12 weeks when the next group of students comes back.
Mickey, I know we had a bit of a debate going on one of your posts on Facebook, where teachers were talking about the lack of, all of that. And then me coming in with my contrary behind was like, dude, like the study of education as a science is like 150 years old tops, where, like you've got like astrology, which is like, astronomy, which is like 2,000 years old. Sorry, man. So it's, as far as educational science goes, we're at the level of astrology, and there's this constant, and I've also struggled with this, being the parent of a child with ADHD, and the Netherlands is kind of strange sometimes. They really like everybody to conform. You have to fit in this little box. And I am not the mom that deals with that. Which is not to say that I haven't blasted teacher and student at the same parent-teacher conference, because I'm fair. So this adjusting the education to fit better, for me is a big thing, because I also do a lot of training in my job. I manage teams, and I have to get people up to speed, and sometimes it works for one and it doesn't work for the other. But I think that finally, an institution of higher learning going, the dumping stuff into people's brains and expecting them to retain it and then make use of it, it's cool.
So I do have a couple more questions, but I wanted to let Ben and Tim have a shot here as well. Do you have any questions for Bob?
Not so much a question, but the whole thing sounds so cool that it makes me wish that, one, I was young enough to start over, and two, good enough at math to be an engineer.
You and me both, brother.
Makes three of us. I have to take my shoes off to count to 20.
Come on, math's not that hard. Math is just a muscle that needs to be worked out. That's all that is. You
Dude,
guys got this.
have we not established that the only way I can do math in my head is if I do it in Dutch?
One of my professors would debate the math is not hard thing. He did a lot of study about how different people's brains are wired for different subjects, more or less.
Yeah, well,
I mean, I know I struggled in algebra in high school, and then when I hit geometry, which came afterwards, was easier for me because I could visualize what was going on. And
see, that's it, Tim. That's the thing right there. Geometry is calculus's little brother. So all you have to do is take geometry and spin it, and you're in good shape.
Right. and that's one thing I've heard about, at least from our school days back in the previous century. That math was just a succession of formulas. You need to know the formula for this and that and the other thing. Whereas in other countries, everything was taught more as a word problem. So It's something tangible you can actually use.
Yes.
Going back to your kindergarten days, Bobby has 5 apples and Jeannie has 3 apples. How many apples do they have total?
So the questions I have, let's bring us back to our original topic here.
I'm sorry, what?
We'll get back to that. So Kettering, having its roots in the automotive industry, are there any students or any actual experiences that stand out to you in terms of being history making in that regard?
History making, I mean, if history making is kind of on a daily basis in a sense that if you look across the automotive industry, a lot of the chief engineers, a lot of the people in the C-level positions in these companies, and a lot of these, they came from here.
Mm.
They came from here, went to Stanford, went to MIT, went somewhere else, and then they went in their roles. I mean, but they have that common foundation. Mary Barra, CEO of General Motors, is a grad of this institution. Gerald Johnson, who's the worldwide head of engineering and manufacturing for GM, is also a grad of this institution. But it's not just GM; it's across the industries. People who are kind of moving the EV vehicle design forward. They come out of here. People running the companies. So it's really being done kind of on a continuous basis. It's really cool. I will tell you one story though about a student, which I think is pretty typical. I was going through the library one day, and this young woman was sitting at the library. She was just working, and I walked over to her and I struck up a conversation because she had a calculus book and she was studying calculus, differential equation, and I'm a physicist by training, so I see a math book, I kind of go straight for it. So I struck up a conversation with her, and she said, I got into her story. She said, I went to another university. This was the second degree she was getting. She went to another university, and she got a degree in French and sociology, and she came out after 4 years, and she found that she couldn't actually get a job in either of those.
Wow.
But her real passion, and the thing that she from a high school she always loved, she just loved, but she didn't know that she could actually work in this, was suspension design.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I like, suspension design? This is your passion? She said, yeah, I love the suspension of vehicles. She said, that's just fascinating to me. So she came here. She enrolled in the mechanical engineering program. She became the lead suspension designer for the SAE Baja team, which is, they build every year. They build a Baja vehicle from scratch. And she was working on the Formula team, and she was their lead suspension designer. And she was doing all this. She was just like in heaven. She's now a senior suspension designer for one of the big three, so it's and she's leading the whole group, and she's like but this is a young woman who started off in French and sociology, but her real passion was doing this work, and she loves it, and she's there now, and she's doing tuning, and she's like one of these emerging gurus of the discipline.
So I thought cool.
That's a cool story because there's a lot of, and we see a lot of that. We see a lot of students. You say some students come to us and they say, I know I want to do kind of this, but I'm not sure. And that's where the program we have is good too, because they don't have to stay with the same placement their whole time here. They can, if they choose, if they find a niche that they really love and is really serving what they want out well, but they can sample. You get some students say, I started in this company doing this, and I thought I would like it, but I really didn't like it.
Right.
And what I really want to do is that. I found I really want to do that. So I switched to that. Man, I am in heaven. That is what I want to do. And finding out what you don't want to do is sometimes as important as finding out what you do.
Oh, so true.
Right.
So
absolutely. I've got a friend who's got a degree in chemical engineering from MIT. And it wasn't until like his last year in the program that he realized that being a chemical engineer is not the same as being a chemist, which is what he really wanted to do.
Yep.
So now he does computer programming.
So Bob, if a student comes to Kettering, do they have the option to do degrees in humanities as well, or do you simply specialize in engineering type programs?
We're a STEM institution, so it's engineering and science and business.
Okay.
We have, interestingly, our humanities and liberal arts program. That department is the largest department that we have.
Huh.
So we have a lot of classes in that area, and they everything from philosophy through ethics through literature through so there's a lot of things that they can do in those areas, but we really specialize in engineering STEM degrees and business as well.
Okay. There's so much going on there. I kind of want to come up and visit the campus and check things out. I've been talking to maybe we should do a road trip, guys. We could do that. I've never been to Flint.
The thing that I think of from that is that no matter how hardcore you are as an engineer or a business person or whatever, take a bunch of humanities. It'll make you a better person.
Round it out a little bit. Yeah.
Amen.
So I've been talking to Jennifer Umberger, and it looks like we actually might have several Kettering-related podcast episodes to do, and I'm looking forward to this because there are so many very cool people that have history with Kettering. Like, I'm going to name names here and tell me if this is not a good idea or not. We can always go back and edit. But Katie Calicut, robotics led her to Kettering Co-op with Magna Seating in her home state of South Carolina, where she now works with BMW. Ian Gibson, Ron Rath. These are all students or alumni. Notable outcomes include people like Christy Potosi, Henry Grassman, Hervé, pronouncing that name correctly, I know, Mr. Tillman. These are folks who did like dual degrees. They came out of Kettering at the same time with both a master's and a bachelor's simultaneously.
Yep.
Now, just amazing work that they're doing for GM, the CIA. These are I'm mixing things up. The names don't belong to the occupations here, but so many notable outcomes, and your reach is nationwide. You've got placements with partnerships with companies all over the world, if I'm not mistaken. Isn't that right?
Yeah. And as students who want to do an international placement often can make those arrangements. We've had students in Europe, of course, all over, but also in places like Singapore and China and
Yep.
Asia, because these are global companies and they can take advantage of that.
Yep, absolutely. Here in Georgia, we've got Bluebird. Those folks are down near Macon, Georgia, I believe. Freudenberg and I think that's in Georgia. I'm not sure. Misty
Got
looked up at that.
here.
Yeah.
Delta.
Delta. That's Delta.
Yeah. There's a bunch.
Yeah, just amazing work. You guys touch so many different things. So let's talk about you then individually. You said you're a physicist.
Yeah, to the point you guys made earlier, I got a degree in physics and I got one in art history.
Awesome.
So I am very much on point with that notion that the humanities and the arts are a very important part of it.
Yeah, that's a great background to be an actual designer rather than just an engineer.
Yeah.
Bring in the art and the mechanics of it.
Yeah.
And one of the things I like to do with these interviews is to make sure we're not doing just a cliched, infomercial kind of thing. So I have to ask point blank, is there something you'd like to talk about that you don't normally get to talk about? And if not, then we'll just move on to the next thing.
I think it's really, I appreciate very much the opportunity to do this today because, like I said offline, I said, I have a career that makes sense only in the rearview mirror, and I come from this from both I'm not just an academic who's come up through the process. I've been on the business side as well, and I used to when I was building company, I used to lament all the time because it was a technical company and we needed engineers, and we would bring engineers in from school, some of the best engineering programs in the country, and they would come in and they couldn't actually design their way out of a paper bag. They had all the book knowledge. They didn't have an inkling of how you actually do this, because engineering and things like that don't work in isolation. They're not islands. Engineers don't get to just design stuff and then send it off. Well, they do if they do that if they don't want to make the company to survive. But they're working with marketing teams. They're working with customers. They're working with all sorts of constraints on what they're doing as well. So you got to be able to work in that environment if you're going to actually be effective. And I just think with all the conversation in higher ed these days about how universities is the degree worth anything? Should we go to university? It's too expensive. What do we get for it? That's a pretty broad brush that we paint a lot of colleges in. But there are examples of schools out there, Kettering being one of them, that do things very differently and have very different outcomes associated with it. Our placement rate every year for students vacillates wildly between 98 and 100%. Right? It's the kind of thing that when you hear this on the press about higher education and the like, you just a lot of times I just want to throw a brick at the screen because I'm saying you're talking about us when you say this is what we want, this is how it should work. You're talking about us.
Yeah, the model already exists.
It already exists.
Yeah. Yes.
But and so I really appreciate the opportunity to chat about it.
Yeah, no, I and I'm glad we get this opportunity, and I hope we get to do a lot more of these. There's so much good storytelling to be had, I think, from students and alumni. The research you guys are doing on campus, workforce development stuff. There's too much stuff out there, and I'm glad we got to meet each other and make this happen. But on a personal level, what is there fun to do in Flint these days?
Flint is actually, Flint is part of metropolitan Detroit.
Yeah.
And the whole area is exploding. I mean,
is it really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Downtown Detroit is in a renaissance, and it's just incredible. And this area is part of that. People, when they come to Flint, Flint's had some challenges over the past few years, and when they come to Flint, I was coming in back from overseas, and I went up to the passport guy, the passport when I had a passport. He said, "Oh, you're from Flint." He said, "How's your water?"
Yeah.
I said, "My water is probably a hell of a lot better than yours." Because we know what's in it, for starters.
It's been deeply examined.
And it's been deeply examined. So we're good. I'm not so sure about you, but we're good. And there's huge investments in the city going on. And there's it's what's to do in Flint is what you find in any large metropolitan area. Everything, all the major sports teams, all the restaurants, and all that kind of stuff. But
well, for years you only ever heard about the blight in Detroit, right? And the flight out of the area, and yes, the water was bad. So for years and years, even on the internet meme scenario, the stories coming out of the region were bad, and now all of a sudden you're not hearing those things. But I guess we're also not seeing those recent success stories, the new development and the money being poured in. I understand you guys have a new research center being built essentially across the street from you guys. It's finished now. We've got a proving ground right across the street from the facility, because where we are located physically in Flint, we are located adjacent to what they called historically Chevy in the Hole, which was the massive Chevrolet assembly plant. In fact, for about 40 years, it was the largest single manufacturing facility in the world. Wow.
As long as it wasn't Ford, we'll be okay.
That's south of us. But
well, just saying.
There you go. And now that factory closed several decades ago. Mm-hmm. And if you go there now, on part of it is our own proving ground. So we have an engineering proving ground for performance, but also for EVs and communication. So it does all the stuff associated with the autonomous vehicle development, et cetera.
Wow.
And across from that is this huge new state park, and they're putting in a whitewater river runs, and we have a soccer team. We've got a professional soccer team. We've got all sorts of things going on in the downtown.
So what I mean, and we're not talking about cars or engineering anymore. What do you think changed for the area? Because again, for the longest time, I always thought that people had given up on Detroit and weren't looking back.
Uh, I'll tell you, and I'll tell you from the standpoint of being, from the South.
Sure.
It's an interesting. I didn't, coming from the South, I tend to think of the Midwest, especially Michigan, as Detroit. And when I got up here, I found out that was really wrong way to think about it. Michigan is in Detroit, in the Detroit area, is this incredibly diverse, interesting place with a real history of people who make things. You can't understate that. I mean, I always think about, you look on the back of an iPhone and it says designed in California, made in China, right? It's the people in Michigan make things. They know how to build stuff, and they are resilient, and they have grit, and they don't give up, and they have a passion for things. I mean, and it took a while for the circle to come back full circle. But, we need to make things in this country.
That is true.
And people here know how to do it. And they've been doing it for hundreds of years. And now all of a sudden, when the folks out in California need to actually make the EVs, or actually, do, where do they look? They look here. They come here to learn those processes. When the aerospace industry needs to learn how to make things reliably and not put 15,000 shims in every aircraft, they
Right.
come here to learn those processes. And it's kind of coming full circle. It's kind of exciting to see.
That's awesome. I'm very glad to hear that. Misty, do you have any last questions for Bob before we go to our wrapping questions?
The only thing I've got in the back of my head, though, is pairing him up with Loxley.
Oh, no, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So Loxley Brown is a friend of ours who's been on the show a couple times. She does a nonprofit that puts girls right in the seat with STEM education relating directly to cars and car design.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Club Athena.
Yeah. Club Athena,
and-
yeah.
It's actually transportation as a whole, and I think,
Yeah.
and the last time she was on the show, she actually was having a camp with a number of young women, where they were going to Indianapolis and were actually in the garage with my least favorite former F1 driver, Roman Grosjean. But besides that, they were also introduced to the logistics of moving between all the
Yeah.
different racetracks, because it was also partially sponsored by DHL. And she works a lot with young women from backgrounds that would provide less opportunity, such as developing countries, etc.
I'll ask Loxley what she knows about Kettering, and
We have a fantastic summer program for young women called Lights. And it's for the high schools, and it's a group of young women come in every summer, usually about somewhere between 30 to 50 in a class, and they spend the better part of, I think, like 8 weeks here on campus. They're in class, they're experiencing all these different things, but it's a real experience because they're going into the plants, they're seeing engineers, they're getting mentored by a lot of engineers who are women who are our alumni, who come back and tell them. But the most powerful thing, one of the most powerful things about the program, I think, is they, for the first time, a lot of these young women are in a group of women a big group who are jazzed about the same stuff as they are, right? Who are jazzed about engineering and they get in this, and the what you see at the end of the process is, I was the only one in my class who liked this stuff. Who the only woman, girl in the class that was interested. And they come here and they see there's young women all over campus. They're in engineering. They're doing suspension design. They're doing so they get totally inspired by it.
Yeah. I'll ask Loxley what she knows about Kettering. And I didn't know you did summer camps and had involvement with. Is that local high schools only, or do they come from
No,
elsewhere?
they come from all over. We have another camp. It's really a residential program called AIM, which is directed at underserved populations of students, and those students come from all over the world. We had one from sub-Saharan Africa last year.
Wow,
Yeah.
Amazing.
very cool. Tim, Ben, you have any other last questions for our guest?
Well, not to open up another rabbit hole here, but we all know the Detroit area is, very big for the auto industry, but what's the car culture like in the area?
Well, I'll summarize it like this. I pulled out. We had a event here on campus, and we had a beloved professor many years ago who came here from Knoxville. He got his degree at UT in Knoxville, but he loved cars. He was from Greensboro, North Carolina, educated at Wake Forest in Knoxville, but he loved cars, so he came here to be a professor. And he drove up. He said he had to come. This was in the early '60s, and he had to come to Kettering in style. So he went to the local dealer and he got a 1959 Cadillac Coupe de Ville,
Oh,
two-door, the year with the biggest fins ever,
yeah.
and drove it up here. And he passed a couple years ago, and a beloved professor by the name of Reg Bell. And we have his Cadillac. So every once in a while, I'll pull that Cadillac Coupe de Ville out and I'll drive it around the town and for events and stuff like this. And I could be driving a Lamborghini Aventador down the street and everybody go,
Yeah.
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 You drive that car down the street anywhere in this area and people stop. They're taking pictures. It's so the car culture here is very alive and well.
Awesome.
Not just on campus, but everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm very glad to hear that. In Atlanta, it's a
Yeah.
little bit different. We have a mix. There's old car culture and there's very much new and exotic car culture. But
with
Yeah.
a small crossover between the two.
with a small crossover for sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
Here they exist seamlessly. They're the most
Yeah.
little bit of everything.
yep.
Yeah. Hey, Bob, I wanted to ask you a question as a Formula SAE veteran myself. And you mentioned how you do your great internship programs. Is your Formula SAE team and Formula Baja teams, are they part of extracurriculars, or is it more part of your internship program?
No, they're extracurriculars here at campus, but they're more than extracurriculars for our students. I have no idea how they do. SAE Formula, they build a Formula One race car from scratch every year, and that is right down to the design of the frame and power plant, powertrain, everything. And they do this while also carrying, a normal student load for their classwork. But those students are amazing. And what's interesting too is a lot of the companies who are recruiting our students, and they come here a lot to recruit students, say, I'm not so worried that you got a B in calculus if you're the head of the powertrain group on the Formula One team. If you can do that, that's what
That's real experience.
that's
Yeah.
what we're looking for. And so I love it. We do all the teams. We do all that. We have all the SAE teams, including aerospace and the EV teams, everything we have.
I think a lot of people aren't aware that SAE is actually broken into more than just road racing. They do the Baja stuff. They do some aerospace stuff. Then I'll actually be going to University of Georgia this Tuesday to talk to their SAE team. They've got a big event going on, so I hope to do some on-site interviews with them, just one-on-one. Bob, I can't thank you enough for taking the time on a Sunday. It's been great for us. So my standard questions for every guest who comes on the Thing About Cars, we used to have 4. However, I'm knocking it down to 3 because, well, you'll see why in a minute. What's your dream car? Do you have one? And if you can't have one, maybe pick a couple.
Oh God, a dream car. That's hard. That's a hard question.
Right.
I've loved so many cars. I've got right now. I'm driving I have a BMW M4 competition X Drive, which is that was one of my dream cars, and I have to say that was pretty good. But my favorite car was one of the first cars I ever had, and I regret selling it so badly. It was a 1976 canary yellow Triumph TR6.
Ah, sweet.
Oh, oh, I loved that car. I loved it. And it would break your heart. If you drove it, it broke. If you didn't drive it, it broke. It just broke. It's the only car I've ever had that you'd be sitting at a stoplight, you push the clutch to the floor, and it would go soft on you, and there'd just be a big puddle of fluid coming out. But it was so glorious, that top down. It was hard, and that twin Webers, and it just had a sound to it. I'll never forget it. So I
have to ask. You're sitting here saying the car was such a huge headache, right?
Yeah.
What made you love it? I mean, I kind of get it, but for our listeners, it's like, was it simply the fact that it was your first car? Was it your first shot at freedom? What made that car lovable?
No, it was just the whole thing. I mean, I love those Smiths. I love the Smiths gauges on the. I love the old style Smiths gauges on cars.
Yeah.
And it was just so beautiful. It was just. It was one of those cars that you walk away from when you put it, you're going in the house or something, and you walk away from it, you look back on it. Damn it.
Yeah. The car had a soul.
It had a soul to it. It really did. And I had an old Alfa 76. I think it was 76 Alfa Romeo Spider once.
Yeah.
A Veloce, and it was the same kind of thing. Same kind of thing. Absolutely phenomenal car. Broke your heart all the time.
My dad had one the same year that was actually pretty reliable. It was one of the cars I learned to drive a clutch with.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right, Bob, second question. Where is your next road trip going to be, or anticipated to be?
Well, I also love motorcycles, and so I ride motorcycles. And and my youngest son and I, we started a tradition a number of years ago where we do some kind of long distance cross country road trip on motorcycles, and we've gone cross the country several times, done backcountry routes across large sections of the country. So I don't know where my next road trip is going to be, but it's going to be something like that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Because I just, get on a motorcycle and just going.
Yeah.
No highway, no expressways, back roads only, dirt and back roads only.
I love it, man. That sounds so good. Ben just did something similar from Washington State back home to Georgia.
If you want to come ride if you want to come ride the awesome twisties of the southern states, that whole Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina. Once they get done cleaning up from the storm, if you want to come ride those roads, let me know. We'll go do it.
Well, we've got a place in the mountains of Georgia. I mean, the mountains of North Carolina. That's where I live, and I've got an S1000R, so I do some of that. I love it.
I'm a BMW guy, so I know what you're talking about.
I mean, point any direction. I always say to people, any road that crosses the Blue Ridge is a good road.
Yes.
You're not going to be disappointed.
Yep. I remember back in my 20s, my stepdad had one of the first Yamaha Royal Star 1500s.
Yep.
In the area, and we would leave from wherever we were going. We'd go up to Hiawassee, break down over to Helen, and then come back down through old 441, and absolutely love it. And that is one of the things that I miss from home. So I just take my little MX-5. I have a little Miata.
Oh yeah.
And I took her at the end of June, took her from my house to Odense, Denmark, which is about an 800-kilometer trip. Oh, God, it was amazing. Oh, God in heaven. But I'll take her over to Luxembourg because that's the closest I get to my Blue Ridge and my Appalachians, those Belgian Ardennes, and just zoom, 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 zoom.
Bob, our third question, and you'll see why this one's slowly getting phased out, is like, what's the most fascinating thing you've seen on the road or in someone's house or garage? And it always, in my experience, this is where most of our guests go, huh? So that's why I think we're going to get rid of it. But
most fascinating thing, most fascinating thing, biggest surprise. I'll kind of change it to that. We had an alum I was visiting. He was down in Bowling Green. Delightful man. He's passed away, unfortunately, but I was visiting him in his house a few years ago, and he said I got something in the garage out there you might be interested in. And so we walk in, and there was this, sitting in the middle of the garage was this, and it was a modest place. It wasn't anything else. It was this split window Corvette, absolutely pristine condition. Nice. Had like 8,000 miles on the speedo. He said, he said, when I went to the school, he was a grad from here. He said, when I went to the school, he said, when I graduated, I just thought, I'm just going to go get one. I've always wanted one of those. So he went and bought it new off the showroom floor, and then he drove it a little, but not much. And I'm looking at this, and I said, do you have any idea what that car is worth?
Yeah.
I mean, it was it's the kind of thing you see at Meekum going across the stage.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Ooh. And it was sitting there in the garage. And so, yeah, that was probably the biggest surprise.
That's amazing. All right. Thank you. And our last question, which is always something random and silly, and I picked from a list of random and silly questions, is, well, what's the best type of cheese?
I like the double cream bries.
Double cream bries. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Those are really good, especially with crackers, talking about sitting out on the porch looking over the mountains and eating. That's probably
That's an excellent answer, I think. And it's funny to me that you had an answer ready to go, because most people are like, what does cheese have to do with anything? But
I mean, I have opinions about cheese, but that's because I live in a high dairy production and consumption country.
Of course.
Yeah.
It's one of life's great pleasures. I think anybody who doesn't have an opinion about it is a real dullard.
Well, I mean, I agree, but we're talking actual serious, honest to God line on my dating app profile. It's, I don't trust people that voluntarily don't eat cheese.
Right. So congratulations, Bob. You've passed the cheese test.
I passed that test.
Let's Bob, thank you for being our guest today. I hope we get to cross paths again soon. Let's answer Tim's trivia question, and then we'll wrap the episode.
Okay, we'll take it again from the top. Yep. What do tetraethyl lead, the octane booster in leaded gasoline, and difluoromethane, aka R12 refrigerant, have in common? Was it A, they eventually faced worldwide bans? B, their research and development was done at General Motors? C, Cornell mechanical engineering graduate Thomas Midgley Jr. was responsible for both of them? Or D, all of the above? Mickey, we'll start with you.
Oh, me? I'm gonna say all the above.
Misty?
Well, since there is no three-eyed fish option, I'm also going to go with all of the above.
Okay, Ben?
Same here.
Okay, and finally, Bob?
Well, I know that they've both been banned worldwide. I know they were both from General Motors, and I know tetraethyl lead. Charles Kettering had a role in the creation of tetraethyl lead. So I'm not sure about C. So, but the first two would imply D.
Okay, and you are correct. And a bit about Thomas Midgley Jr. He said the note that I found on him was the brilliant but unfortunate Midgley was ultimately strangled by a device he had invented to help himself get in and out of bed.
Oh boy!
Yes. Oh my goodness!
So that is classic.
Yes, and so he went the same way of R12 and tetraethyl lead.
Well, and again, I don't want to go down another rabbit hole, but the whole tetraethyl lead thing is said to cause a generation or two of cognitive decline amongst users of leaded gasoline.
Well, that leaded paint. I mean, it's amazing the there's a great correlation of the reduction of lead in consumer products and in violent crimes in the U.S.
That's true. Yeah, that is true. Anyway, rabbit hole for another day. Bob,
Right.
if a listener wanted to learn more about Kettering, shall we send them to kettering.edu? Is that the best way for them to go?
That's perfect.
Awesome. Kettering EDU. And I really advocate for this kind of education. I know that we have great institutions here in Georgia that do really good work, but I think your model is just absolutely stellar. And I think you're right. You don't teach piano players to play without a piano. And this is just makes a whole bunch of sense to me. So thank you for being our guest today. And again, I hope we get to do this again sometime in the future.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Bob.
much. It's been a real pleasure.
Absolutely love it.
Thanks, everybody. You guys have a great, safe time out there. And to our listeners, be safe on the roads. We'll see you with another episode soon.
See
Ciao,
ya.
y'all.
Bye, y'all.